Hi, everyone. Welcome to Asala's Classroom Talks, where we mentor future lawyers, we foster critical thinking, and we simplify the law for the general public, the students, and the lawyer. Today, we want to discuss a very recent topic, which has a lot of implications to each and every one of us. And we want to look at artificial intelligence and the legal profession, opportunities, and threats. We are privileged to have one of the gurus on this topic joining us as our guest for tonight, Mr. Stephen Kiptines. Kiptines, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay, I'll start by correcting the term guru. I am absolutely not a guru. What she meant is that I'm a student. I'm a student of things, technology, the policy, ethics, and the law. And so I am a practitioner in legal practice, practicing a number of things all around technology. And because I do enjoy the confluence of technology, the law, and AI, that constitutes the main aspects of what I practice in. I've had the occasion to also teach in that space for a good number of years. So really, as far as introduction goes, that's all that's really relevant and important for purposes of our chat today.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Kiptines. And perhaps just to set the pace, would you please explain to our audience when we talk of AI, what is this AI? What are we referring to?
Okay, I'm pretty sure that everyone in our audience has had the opportunity to interact with artificial intelligence, which is what the acronym AI stands for. And in interacting with artificial intelligence, you then would have had an opportunity to experience what AI is, which is essentially uh, emerging technologies that leverage on the ability of the technology or the machines to learn, iterative learning um, through a lot of processing of data, and at the back end, using algorithmic systems to perform tasks that are everyday tasks. Tasks like decisioning. I am going to go to the office using route A and not route B. I am looking at this menu and I'm going to order my food A and not food B. So it's basically how machines work together machines work to learn. They process huge volumes of data, and that really is where the big thrust of AI is, the ability to process huge volumes of data. Human beings can process data, but not with the kind of volumes that these machines do. The other thing about machines like humans is when you're a child, you're not born knowing how to speak. Children speak at different ages, but there's a certain standard that is monitored by, I guess, child psychologists. Children start speaking, saying certain words at a certain age. They learn how to crawl, they learn how to stand, they learn how to walk, they learn how to speak. And it is that watching, learning of an otherwise normal child, which allows them to pick up and learn. And in the same way, machines can learn and technology can pick up so much and much faster than human beings can, especially because of that consumption of huge amounts of data. So that processing of large volumes of data. And when you interact with it, if I'll share maybe somewhere along the presentation, the different AI platforms that are available for research purposes. When you interact with the machine, it interacts with you based on the stimuli, the queries, the questions, the research interests. The very same machine will work differently for Dr. Asala. And so it learn what you want, learn what you need, and be useful for you. And in conclusion, that is why you now have in AI something known as AI companions. And AI companions are basically AI friends for people who, I guess, are lonely. And AI will learn that you're not interacting on certain platforms with your friends and start engaging with you. But that's a whole other story. Yeah, that's sort of what AI is, in my view.
Yeah. And just from what you have already said, Captain, is how would you help our audience understand? Because assuming that we are having lawyers, law students, and practitioners, how can this AI make legal education, legal services much more interactive? And even for the normal citizen, how do we utilize this AI in a manner that is beneficial or more efficient to the services that we need as students, as a practitioner, and even as ordinary Kenyan? How do we interact with this AI?
Okay, so it starts with precisely why AI has grown at the pace that it has. It is a very amazing means of cutting costs. It's a very critical, essential tool to enhance or boost efficiency. It can help improve accuracy. In other words, the mundane everyday tasks that we do can be taken over by AI in a way that allows us to focus on some of the more critical aspects. And to be honest, when I say critical aspects, maybe AI might not be amused that I say that, because if flying a plane is a critical aspect because you're carrying human souls on board, well, AI can take off, can have a plane take off, can land the plane, can fly the plane, which is a critical thing. Because of the progress of AI and technology, you can have certain surgeries which now can be done by certain machines, and all that is required is not just the innovation of the machines, but the machine brain to teach it how to undertake certain surgeries. And for us in the legal profession, then it is the mundane tasks that we do every day. It is legal research. Every single lawyer or person in the legal profession has to undertake some legal research of some kind. Whether you work in a corporate, you work in a university, you work in practice, legal research. Legal research, e-discovery tools if you're in practice. So at a basic level, if you're undertaking research, it means you're trying to consume a certain amount of data in order to come to draft perhaps a document, draft a memo, draft a legal brief. You're doing your thesis. That legal research and the consuming of huge volumes of data will require you to spend a lot of hours seated in one place, or in different places for that matter, going through all these documents, all this information. In fact, even just identifying where that information is a task in itself before you go through the data. And so AI can really simplify legal research or make it more efficient, because it will help direct where you want to go for specific types of information. So it'll direct you there, and based on certain keywords, based on certain key structures of what you're trying to do, you have a topic you're trying to write on, it'll give you so much material. What AI can do for you today, which it couldn't do so maybe 2 years or so ago, and AI has been with us for a while, is to give you summaries. So it will pick summaries of what you're looking for in order to guide you. So the other things that we do in the legal profession are document reviews. So you're reviewing contracts, you're reviewing agreements, and these tend to be voluminous documents. You're reviewing case law, you're reviewing all sorts of documents to enable you write or draft what it is you need. Document automation can be done very easily with AI, again, within the context of the legal profession, and this will result in creating very easily accessible legal documents. The other day, I was talking to a client who made it clear to me that he has started incorporating AI in his corporate business, and his head of legal is under instructions not to send any work to a law firm that can be done through the use of AI. And I said, why would you want to do this? And he says, well, if I ask you to write for me a legal opinion, you're going to charge me for 6 hours worth of work. The amount of time I am spending in that 6 hours, of course, is time that I should charge for. But having said that, what AI can do is reduce that period of time to possibly an hour, 2 hours. It depends on what it is. And so his argument to me was, I'm happy to continue sending work or writing briefs or writing opinions to you. However, you will not charge me for 6 hours because you can use the same tools I'm using. The only thing I will need from you, which came into our discussion at some point, is the validation of the information that I have obtained through using AI because of something that has been known as AI hallucination, where when you're looking for information, AI does not know how to say, I don't know, I don't have, I can't find it. It'll find something, even if it has to, I suppose, manufacture it. And that is why most of you will have heard of the scandal of lawyers appearing in court with cases which absolutely did not happen. I mean, it goes as far as providing fictitious citations. That is a problem. So you will still need lawyers, and that's probably one of the questions you might ask at the end. Lawyers are still needed, and this is what I told my client. You'll still need lawyers to ensure that this legal text that I'm going through is indeed within the context of the laws of Kenya. It is sound because what we as lawyers have to have to undertake to do is to take legal responsibility for an opinion that you do for a client. And so that responsibility right there is not something that can be found out to an AI machine. You throw in certain prompts into the tool and it gives you a report. So document automation, drafting of legal documents. Again, I can go into details, but let me just sort of go through what's off the top of my head. But drafting of legal documents, again, it'll help you draft legal documents, perhaps in a far more efficient way. The number of times that I'm sure you as lawyers, if you're in practice, have seen documents with glaring clerical, grammatic, typographic errors. It'll draft it for you with none of those errors. Communicating with clients, if you're in practice, and client management, that is something that can be done through the use of an AI tool. Predictive legal analysis, when you're trying to determine when you're trying to look for trends, you're looking for an analysis of certain cases in children's rights. It'll give you certain predictive trends in a way that will take you a longer time to do that. Actually, this could be very helpful in giving you the ability to strategize better. So case management as well, case tracking, filing, bring ups, marketing. So there's just so much.
Mhm.
That's not an exhaustive list, but that's what AI can do for us in the legal profession, and then some.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Kitines. From what you're professional already, by lawyers, by students, what would you say are some of the moral or ethical problems that come with using AI?
Now, that's $1 million question, because one of the things that I mentioned in after when I just spoke is taking legal responsibility for legal opinions. The reason that our profession is highly regulated in terms of the training, the qualification entry, while you are in practice, that's because there are certain things that we as lawyers are held to. And one of those is the ability to take responsibility for the work that you do, for the documents that you draft, for the opinions that you draft, for the arguments that you make. It's why every year we are required as lawyers to obtain current practicing certificates. It's why we're required to go through training every year to ensure that you're keeping yourself current, you're learning, you're not sitting comfortable. It is why, you have the pre-bar. It's why you have the bar exam. It is why the legal training is very, very precise. And I guess by that I mean there's certain requirements that you must have as a law school in order to get permission or the license from the Council of Legal Education to teach lawyers. And so that responsibility is a really big deal, and that's unique to us as lawyers. It's one of the things that can cause you to have personal responsibility. It's the reason why we take out professional indemnity insurance, because if I give an opinion and it blows up in the face of the client, well, the client can come after me and say, "Hey, you gave me an opinion and it blew up in my face, and therefore I want to be compensated." So, but within the context of AI, it's so you cannot divorce that responsibility from yourself as a legal professional simply because you're using AI to facilitate the creation, drafting of legal documents. You must take responsibility. You must put a signature. You must put your name there. But what AI will do is give you a greater degree of accuracy, a greater degree of specificity, so that you're more likely than not to actually give a much sounder, much more robust opinion than not, because the ability of AI to review large volumes of data in a way that a human being cannot means that you're more likely, if you're writing an opinion, to give an opinion that has considered quite a wide variety of related issues, of course, to the opinion that one is giving, but taking into account that hallucinations still exist. Now, perhaps I should say this, I'm not trying to give AI a bad rep by saying that hallucinations will then create an incorrect record because AI may not be able to say, "I didn't find this information." The more you use an artificial intelligence tool for your research, for your drafting, for whatever purposes, the better it gets at giving you what you want. And the better it gets at learning where to look for the information that you need, which means the incidences of hallucinations reduce. By way of example, my spouse is in the medical profession, and the organization that she works for started using artificial intelligence for diagnosis, and I guess recommendations for medical treatment. And in the early days, the rate of, how do I what's the right word? The correctness of the diagnosis was at a much lower level than it is today. That's just because of how the AI tool works. And so it has gone up to the late 90s in terms of how precise it is. In other words, the more you use it, the more you interact with the tool, the better it becomes at knowing what you want as an individual and what you want as an organization. So accuracy, absolutely fantastic. The other thing with AI, you can have AI tools that can help enhance something like client confidentiality, which is a key requirement. This is an underpinning of how we as advocates work in the profession. So you can have AI tools that can help you enhance client confidentiality as opposed to um, for example, having files stored in a physical registry, which there's nothing wrong with having interns and pupils, but they're not accountable. If someone pays off a pupil or an intern in my firm to access a certain file, and it's easy to go and access that information and make copies, the same would be made a lot harder, not impossible, if the information is stored in a soft format which requires certain permissions to access certain information. And certain files can be made inaccessible based on your category of access. So client confidentiality can be enhanced. I think the other thing is that we overlook, and this both happens on the legal profession and on the judicial administration of justice side. Um, Biases and fairness. Now, this might sound contradictory, but we all are subject to our biases based on our socialization, based on the experiences we have gone through. And that plays out in the cases we take, it plays out in the opinions that we give. If I'm standing in class to give an example or to make a certain point on a certain legal text, I will be speaking based on my experiences or my understanding, which is inherently biased. AI, on the other hand, it's arguable will not have bias because it has not gone through some of the challenges I have gone through. I like to give the example of if I was the father of a girl who was raped and I happen to be in the judiciary, of course, I'll go through the training about how important it is not to be biased, but I happen to listen to a case of rape. Then, as much as I try not to bring that side of my experience to bear, it might just show up in a very subtle way, assuming I have very good self-control. But if you take the facts of a legal case into an AI decisioning tool, and you put them in there. And there are AI tools which are used for family matters, which are used in different countries for traffic offenses, used for administrative law decisions, used for intellectual property decisions. If you take the facts of the case and put them into this AI tool, well, it doesn't suffer from the same biases I have. Consequently, it can make far better, more justiciable decisions, if you like,
Mhm.
than I would. But guess what? AI tools are based on algorithms. Algorithms, binary ones and zeros, are drafted or written by humans who are subject to bias. What do I mean? In a couple of years ago, we had a certain client, multinational client, who had an issue because when you typed into that search engine what a beautiful woman, beautiful girl would be, at that early stage, it gave you a light-skinned person with certain physical features. What that seemed to suggest is that if you are light-skinned, you are beautiful, and if you are dark-skinned, well, the reverse is true, which was not the case. It was simply the fact that as a lot more people were writing these algorithms, the people who are writing these algorithms were subject to their own biases. And so if my bias is towards a light-skinned person,
Mhm.
I will inevitably have those physical characteristics, those physical features as suggestive of a person who's good looking, and the reverse is true. And at that time, what needed to happen, because some human rights activists had a problem with it, rightfully so, they then had to review the algorithm and start putting in different types of physical characteristics and race pigmentation, so
Mhm.
that being beautiful is not a factor of whether you're black or you're white. And so what I'm arguing here is that you can actually code bias into algorithms, regardless of what I just said. Like I said, it sounds like a contradiction, but that's just, how it works.
Mhm.
Transparency, I think with AI, just latching onto the point I just made, there can be a lot greater transparency of decisions because of that lack of bias. And it's possible to speculate, quote and unquote. It's possible to speculate is not the right word. It's possible to almost determine what kind of decision will be arrived at based on the facts that go into the AI tool. So there's a level of transparency. But the flip side, if you're talking about elections in countries, if you look at our election laws, one of the fundamental characteristics of what an election should be is transparent. And I've said this in different presentations in different fora. If you vote, we used to have boxes that were black, which used to suffer the sins of vote stuffing. And we then came up and said we need to have transparent boxes so we can see that before the votes are taken, there are no stuffed ballots inside. And therefore, when they're pulling out the votes, you can see, this vote is for candidate A, this vote is for candidate B, right down to the end. But when you introduce technology, and I suspect I saw an article today somewhere, I think our IBC might be considering e-voting. I'm not sure. Let me not speculate on that. But I read an article suggesting that when you vote using a computer, what happens is you'll go onto a technological device, you will pick your candidate, and you will tick the box for your candidate. Well, what happens is at the back end of that device, it'll tabulate the number of votes for candidate A versus candidate B. And one question that was asked in India a couple of years ago, because India does e-voting, is what if during the voting, after every 1,000 votes, it sends 10 votes instead of votes going to candidate A, it goes to candidate B. And the point there was we can't see what's happening. It's happening on the back end. There is no transparency. Of course, there are ways to mitigate this using technology, but I'm just trying to explain why transparency as a feature in elections can be perceived differently when you come to e-voting. I will conclude by saying, and there's so many issues on the legal and ethical side, but you've probably heard of deep fakes. You've heard of people's voices being cloned. So you will see the face of Evelyn Asala, yet she's speaking certain things that you know she would absolutely not speak. Or you'll see her mouthing certain words, and that can possibly be introduced as evidence in court to say, well, she said these things which were against cohesion and integration in the country, and therefore she should be charged with trying to manipulate or rile up emotions in the country against a particular community. When you look at the image, it's definitely Dr. Asala. When you look at what she's saying, you're like, my goodness, did she really say this? But the truth is, it's not. It's a deep fake. And there are tools to find this out. But sometimes the damage is already done by the time you bring in these tools. But of course, in the context of evidence in court, those must be brought to bear. Is there such a thing as over reliance on technology? Yes, there is. If we rely too much on technology as lawyers to the point of moving away from employing our analytical skills, our critical thinking, that can be a problem. That can be an ethical issue because I come to you as a client, I have a legal problem, I ask you to resolve it. All you do is throw all this material into the AI tool, you come up with something and you give it to me. And I don't know any better, I rely on it. It may or may not blow up in my face, but even if it does not blow up in my face, what happens to you as a legal professional? Well, you're becoming dumb. Essentially, you're not applying yourself. And that's why I think legal professionals are still necessary. But I think it behoves us, not just as legal professionals, but as individuals, use AI tools in a way that can enhance your ability to continue thinking critically, to continue applying your ability to analyze, make logical decisions. Then we have, of course, data protection, which is a huge issue, breaches of privacy, which AI can, in fact, be used as a tool to breach significant privacy. We have intellectual property rights. That's a huge issue. The whole purpose of intellectual property rights is to give you the ability to exclude everybody else for a certain period of time. And when you have an AI tool that's trolling the web, coming up with books, material that is protected by copyright, then you have to say there's a problem, and that is why the EU came up. The EU have an act. The European Union does have an act and a code of conduct. This code of conduct has been signed up by some multinationals and not others. Let me not name any right now, but it is very dangerous when an entity does not sign up to a tool like the AI Code of Conduct because it is trying to protect copyright. There are companies who have gone out and written to companies that own AI tools and said, if you or your AI tool rather accesses information on the web that is copyrightable and you do not seek license, consent, we will sue. And there are suits that have already happened. So I guess the long and short of what I'm saying is there needs to be a way in which AI can be employed ethically in a responsible way, which doesn't make you as an individual take leave of your senses or the requirements, the need to comply with existing laws. There are laws in the country on so many things, and one must absolutely remain cognizant of that when engaging with AI. I think that's the importance of the ethical standards that the EU is leading the way in trying to create. And entities have realized that AI can be very dangerous in a way that provides for breach of privacy, breach of personal data, etc. And so we need to employ those methods even as we facilitate efficiency, etc.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Fitness. It's quite a captivating talk. And when you talk of accountability, you keep referring us to the EU and what they are putting in place. So would you maybe just try and help us understand in our Kenyan context, what have we done? Does it just leave us at the place of personal responsibility, ethical concerns for the profession? What exactly has been done in Kenya, or what should we need to do? Supposing a lawyer depended on AI and there are issues that have arisen, is there a law that we can turn to? Or what exactly happens, or we leave this to be an ethical issue?
Okay, that's a very good question. Let me start by saying when COVID happened and the judiciary very commendably made the switch to online access to justice, let's call it that, it spawned a whole misunderstanding about the ethics that we learned had to sit for an exam in law school and have to continually comply with. What do I mean? Suddenly, a number of lawyers began to think that the rules that apply when you appear in open court don't apply anymore. That's when you began to see lawyers accessing the courtroom virtually without a blazer, without a tie. They're sitting down having breakfast. I mean, there was one matter I was in sometime last year, and the man was sitting at the breakfast table with his children and family, and he was purporting to try and address the court. We've had horror stories of someone who was in the shower, someone is driving in traffic. I mean, there are things that we should not get or engage in because there's already a rule that guides us. Our ethical code of conduct as lawyers guides what we should do and not do as lawyers, regardless of whether you are a lawyer offering this service virtually or using virtual tools to provide your service. There are certain things that don't change. So that's a starting point. We're still bound by our ethical values. Very, very important. The starting point for any legal professional in Kenya, frankly, for any Kenyan citizen, is the Constitution. So that provides an underpinning. Of course, we don't expect our Constitution to speak to issues of AI, just like you don't expect the Constitution to go into details of technology law, to go into details of competition law. It's meant to provide certain highlights. But the starting point is our Constitution, and what our Constitution spells out in terms of, say the Bill of Rights. All those apply regardless. So what I'll call the regulatory environment or ecosystem of our country with regard to AI as we speak today is we have the Constitution, we do have a Data Protection Act 2019 and the attendant regulations, we have the Kenya Information and Communications Act, we have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. Those are sort of, besides the Constitution, the primary statutes that have something to do with AI in one form or another, not directly. Well, directly in the case of, well, to be honest, in all of them, because if you look at the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, it'll speak to certain crimes which can be committed using technology, which AI is. Then we have the National Digital Master Plan under the Kenya Information and Communications, the Ministry of Information, Communications, and Digital Economy. We have the Kenya National, the Artificial Intelligence Strategy, which was promulgated by our Ministry of Information, Communications, and Digital Economy, which speaks to what we're trying to achieve as a country by 2030 within the context of AI. And this has drawn on what would be AI best practice. As a matter of fact, we have a continental AI strategy under the EU, which speaks to what we're trying to do with AI in Africa. And one of the key things it mentions is we need to practice and use AI in an Afrocentric way, which is quite unique because Africa is not a hot destination for innovation, much like the Northern Hemisphere countries are, much like China is. In fact, I think today China is probably one of the leading innovation countries globally. So it's interesting how the Afrocentricity around as a characteristic of applying AI strategy in Africa would work. But I digress. So you have our artificial intelligence strategy. We have a draft bill, which I think is still a draft bill in Parliament. I could be wrong about this. The robotics and AI bill, robotics and AI intelligence society bill. So that's not yet law. And then you have a draft information technology AI code of practice. Again, I think this was published around about 2024. All this is to say, so we don't have a statute addressing AI exclusively. And maybe this is a good thing because the challenge with governments today is AI is probably the most unregulated um, form of technology use. Okay, you really can't regulate AI. It's highly unregulated. But the flip side is this: AI is probably very heavily regulated because every government is trying to regulate AI, trying to say something about AI, trying to come in. So the question is, can AI be regulated? Can you or can't you regulate it? It's when we were in law school, a lot of what we learned was around how statutes applied within geographic jurisdictional limits. We didn't have concepts of long arm statutes, which we have seen over the last 10, 15 years. And so the very same way that long arm statutes have been working is now how governments are creating statutes ostensibly to apply within their countries, but really they apply outside because they will apply to anybody that's engaging, dealing, trading with their companies. The EU is a perfect example. That is why the EU AI Code of Conduct applies right across the board. You want to continue trading with us, you want to continue making money in Europe, well, guess what? It doesn't matter that you're not domiciled here, you have to comply. And so the question about whether AI can be regulated is a fundamental question. The mistake that I think most governments make is to become overly prescriptive about how AI can be regulated. And when you do that, to be honest, you end up with egg on your face because there's things that you cannot control outside your jurisdiction. So, despite the fact that governments haven't stopped trying to regulate AI, it just becomes a lot way more difficult. Now, if you are the EU, because there's a huge market there, if you're China, there's a huge market there, it's possible to create regulations that require the compliance of non-local, non-locally domiciled companies because they want access to your market. So you want access to our markets, well, guess what? You have to comply. For us in Africa, we're still trying to emerge. We're still trying we're trying to be competitive. We still benefit from affirmative action platforms like this is what I call it, like AGOA. Okay, AGOA helps us. It really helps give an opportunity to some of our local manufacturers. But it's an affirmative action thing, which is helping us, no doubt. But if African governments are overly prescriptive in how they legislate for AI, then why would anybody want to come into your market? If you're a country, you're small enough that you do not have sufficient market to attract that kind of the kind of revenues that some of these multinationals would like. And so if we're thinking as Africa, that's different. If we came together as Africa, and that's why I like that there's an African AI document which is going to try and create parity for us in Africa. But of course, we know that sovereignty does its own thing. And so it's important that in legislating for AI, either it's done through amendments to existing legislation or it's done in a way that is enabling, not prohibitive. The big challenge for me, I think, and for a lot of governments is the ethical basis. AI can be used for unethical purposes, And that is what we all should try and stop. I think that is what is important to contain because algorithms can be dangerous. Algorithms can be used to commit crime. Algorithms can be used for absolutely mischievous purposes. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. So in a nutshell, what I read out is sort of the regulatory landscape for AI in Kenya. I think Kenya is absolutely on the right track. We cannot be left behind. To be honest, Rwanda went ahead and they're coming up. I think Rwanda already has an AI policy. We don't have a policy yet. We do have a strategy, which is good, a good starting point. I think it's important that we as a country maintain the thin line of creating a policy and ultimately, if we have to create a statute, one that is enabling, which allows for growth. It's the reason why Kenya continues to have the reputation of being a Silicon Savannah. Many entities want to come into our country to trial out their AI, their applicability of AI. And Kenyans seem to have the ability to consume and embrace the use of technology in a way that's very different from other African countries. In other words, there's a wholesale acceptance. It's probably why, tongue in cheek, Kenyans have been known as the bullies of social media because they leverage on the use of technology and platforms for good and also for not so good use.
Oh, thanks a lot, Fitness, once more. You mentioned the dangers, the risks associated with AI. And we can see a trend where every corporate entity, locally and internationally, wants to embrace AI in its day-to-day activities. But now when you look at the law, from what you have shared with us, it becomes clear that our law is still fragile in the sense that it's still in the formative stages. We are yet to say that we can now concretely regulate artificial intelligence. Do you think this is a reason for us to fear for our sensitive and private information that we share with these institutions?
Okay, that's a tricky question to answer. I say tricky because it's very subjective. Absolutely, we should fear. I mean, I will tell you that as a technophile, I pretty much embrace and support anything and everything technology, but I am extremely cautious about it. I'm not even sure that this is safe to say, but yeah, I think it's safe enough that I can say it. I did not embrace internet banking until this year, just because I just felt, man, there's a bit of a risk. And that speaks to how I approach technology in certain ways. Why? Because today there's a lot of safe measures that have been employed by most commercial banks around internet banking, which is to say you have 2FA or MFA, multi-factor authentication. So by the time I'm logging in, some message must come to my phone. It must ask me to input certain secret codes, secret messages or my password. It's not just password enter, which can be hacked, and I get in. So what I'm saying is it's very subjective. I think there's a good reason to fear to the extent that it can make you cautious. Having said that, we are in a good place as a country that we have not legislated against technology. And we have an administration that is extremely supportive of the application of technology in different ways in our country for the benefit of the citizens. There's a digital agenda that's been set out. I mean, one of the big things, if you like, for example, is the growth of services, the services that the citizen can access on the e-citizen platform. Even though there's been court cases around that, in a way that has grown to 5, 6, 7,000 services, I think, at this point. So technology is helpful. Artificial intelligence is absolutely essential and important for us,
Mhm.
not just as a country, but as a continent. And so I think that if we can legislate around the parameters of ethics, around the parameters of preserving privacy, because privacy is a big deal. In fact, once you lose your privacy, if you get socially engineered and you lose the critical aspects of who you are. If someone is able to get, they can get your face online because this is being broadcast on YouTube. So someone can get your face, Evelyn, online. If they can get access to your ID, they can get access to your passport, then it's a very short hop to getting other details of yourself. And that's how social engineering would start. And to that extent, you can be, as the legitimate Evelyn Asala, be locked out by another Evelyn Asala who is a bot and can access your bank accounts, can access your pension, can access the things that otherwise you'd be able to access. Now, physically, they can't access the stuff that you can access physically, but a lot of things, a lot of activities, a lot of businesses, professional engagements are happening online. And if you get locked out online, if someone is able to project and malign your character by, like I said, voice cloning, by some of the deep fakes that are created, then you will lose your reputation. And before you can actually shout help, the stuff has gone halfway around the world. So I think it is important to ensure that how we engage with AI is in a very cautious way that facilitates, that provides for the growth of efficiency, for the growth of business, for the growth of Kenya as an attractive business destination, but not in a way that's careless. Now, inevitably, we have people who will want to use it for their own purposes. Now, there are companies across the globe. Well, let me not say companies. There's one company that I'm aware of that is trying to create what is known as a unique human. And that company has attempted to come into this country. The whole idea is to create a unique human through what is the most unique feature of human beings, which is the iris. So apparently, thumbprints are not the most unique. You may remember that a couple of years ago, there was a bomb blast in Madrid, and there was a partial print that was lifted off of some of the remnants of the bag that was carrying the bomb, something like that. And it led the investigators to an American lawyer in the US who was arrested and charged. Lo and behold, it was discovered that in fact those prints did not belong to the American lawyer, but to some, I think he was a Moroccan gentleman. I'm mistaken. He was from an Arab country, one of the Arab countries in Africa. And the American lawyer who was wrongfully arrested and charged ended up suing the government, and I think he got paid a handsome sum of money. All that to say that fingerprints aren't unique. So this company is trying to create a unique human being by taking the most unique feature as we know it today of the human being, which is the iris. The iris, as far as we know today, cannot be replicated through AI. And so if I can take a picture of Evelyn, Evelyn's eyes, get Evelyn to verify that this is Evelyn and there is no other person, and we'll check in our database. Is there anybody else who perhaps to whom these eyeballs belong to? And as soon as we can verify that there is no one else like Evelyn, then green tick, Evelyn becomes unique across the globe. Now, what can happen is because of that uniqueness, you can use that unique identifier to access any of the things that you access online because of that uniqueness. It will be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to recreate those eyeballs in the way that you believe in God, the Lord, the good Lord made them. And so, because of that uniqueness, it creates a unique human being. So, you wouldn't have an unreasonable fear of logging into, say, your bank account online, because as one of the authentication factors, if you're asked to look at the camera so that your iris, and a lot of phones today do that, then it will recognize this is Evelyn. I don't need your, I don't need your ID anymore. I don't need your name. What I need are your eyeballs. And if I can't get your eyeballs in, you can see that there's a high level of security. Now, if that is replicated for about 2, 3, 4 billion people, you can begin to see the level of uniqueness that it creates across the globe and the level of security that
Mhm.
that provides. And that security is exactly what we're trying to look for through all these tools. So AI is good. I think we all must embrace it in one form or another in the respective forms that we are in the respective professions that we're in, but not in a way that would be careless until we can have some level of uniqueness around
Mhm.
how we can be identified online.
Yeah, and Tines, do you foresee a scenario where lawyers should be afraid that AI might just replace their work?
No, absolutely not. The people that shall be replaced, well, I should qualify my answer. There are lawyers who will be replaced. The lawyers that choose not to adapt will absolutely be replaced without question. There is there is something I found. I don't think I can find it now. I read yesterday or the day before about how law firms in the US have embraced AI in a way that says we're not looking back to ease practice, to facilitate things that were being done in a manual way before. Now, if you choose not to adapt, if you choose to stay on a certain spot and not adapt through learning, through getting to grips with what it can do for you, for your clients, for your profession, then you will lose your role as a legal professional in the country. I think what AI will do, just like computers at the turn of the century, it'll create, it'll spawn new skill sets. If you're studying law today and the university that you're in, and I'm treading on very dangerous ground here, but if the university that you're in doesn't have a course in technology, in technology and the law, then you need to move to another university double time. In other words, you need to start coming to grips with how technology is relevant and important in this chosen profession. Of course, you can go beyond your LLB training into colleges that offer training in technology, because then you'll have AI. One of my good friends, Tony, who has just been an evangelist, I would call him, for AI on the continent, has just been, has just been engaging with AI so incessantly to the point where he is such an expert. I mean, when he speaks on AI, I love to listen. So start getting familiar, if you're not already, with AI concepts and models. Not for now, ongoing. Experiment. One of the things I see on some YouTube channels that I watch, some little clips that come in and say, it says, young kids in their 20s are using AI to create businesses and make money. And then it goes on and says, but the only AI that people over 40 know is ChatGPT. You just ask it questions. You know what? If you're in that category, start there. Start experimenting. Go to ChatGPT, get an account, start asking questions. There are many other tools. I mean, I think one of the more efficient tools I do like now is DeepSeek, far more than ChatGPT. But having said that, ChatGPT is something I've worked with for quite a while. But there's a lot you can do with the different AI tools that exist. In fact, I think there's somewhere I had written them. I can't remember. Let me see if I can find. So some of the AI tools that can be used include, of course, OpenAI, ChatGPT. To be honest, that's a leading tool, and I think it's very efficient, very easy to use. It's very friendly. You have an AI tool called Harvey. You have an LexisNexis. We all know that as legal professionals. Legal research, information workflows, etc. for legal professionals. So that has an AI tool component. There's another one called Law Notion. There's Genie AI. There's Robin AI. There's Luminance. Interestingly, ChatGPT has been embedded on the Kenya Law Guide. So again, you can use ChatGPT to look for what to aid your research. Legal Eagle Kenya, you have Wakili AI, you have Litigate. not litigate, but litigate, Gate. So you have a lot of tools and options for different tools of AI that can be used. So I think there's no excuse. Experiment, try. The more you do it, the better you get. If you can attend AI trainings, if you can even get certified, even better, please do that. I try to attend AI sessions wherever I hear them, especially from people that I look up to, people like Tony, etc. I definitely would be attending those AI trainings. Try to get digitally literate. And digital literacy is not Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. No, not that. That was when I was in college, way back when. Digital literacy goes way beyond that right now. Of course, get to know what privacy protection, data protection issues are about within the context of artificial intelligence. Have a general knowledge about what AI can do for you in different spheres of your life, not just as a professional, different other spheres of your life. I mean, if you have a hobby, if you like running, if you like swimming, if you like cooking, there's AI tools you can use to help you become better at what you're doing. I think keeping track of AI developments locally as well as regionally and internationally, like the AI code of practice I was speaking about in Europe, that's absolutely critical. That's absolutely amazing. You need to get in touch with what's happening with AI at different levels of your country, of the region, etc. And then I think making sure that you can employ AI as far as possible in your life wherever relevant. I think that is so critical because it starts small. So I think if you do all these things, then you're making yourself relevant to AI for years to come. Conversely, if you don't do these things, then, you know, AI will come and overtake you and there'll be nothing for you to do. So I'll leave it
Thanks
there.
a lot, Fitness, once again. You notice that we have spoken a lot about enhancing ourselves with AI, the positive nature of AI. But again, we need to be mindful of the fact that, and I'm going into my area of strength, yeah, criminal law. You know, we have seen instances where criminals have also exploited AI in a manner that, they circumvent the law. So the same way we want to enhance and develop our skills in AI, they are also doing the same. They have to circumvent the law and commit crimes. What would you have to say about this? How should the law respond?
Look,
And what are some of these instances? Think of, for instance, money laundering. I know these are areas you have engaged with at length. Think of money laundering, for example. You know, how should the law, should we still retain the law as it is, or is there a way the law should now respond to curb the development of criminals in AI?
now, when cars were invented, the original plan was not for cars to be used to take away human life through driving recklessly. The fact that you take a car and you use it to drive recklessly as to take away human life means that the law, the penal code, will find you culpable. You will be charged, hopefully convicted, and do time. In the same way, when robots were created, and robots help us do things, and cars in many ways today are just robots because they have machines that allow them to think, to iterate. And when the cars were created, when robots were created, AI is with us today. It is not possible to conceive that everybody would want to use AI for the right purposes. That's why criminals exist. That's why you have administration of justice tools. That's why you have policemen. That's why you have investigative agencies. So criminals will obviously try to do what they're doing more efficiently, just like we are trying to do things efficiently through using AI, um, you know, to hack into my bank account, if that's my biggest apprehension. And so I think the law, as currently drafted, I think is still pretty suitable to address offenses around the use of technology. If you look at the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, it will describe the offenses that will happen when you're using technology. And AI is just one form of technology. I think it is sufficient. The challenge really will be, where do we find this criminal if this criminal is committing the offense when he's based in Outer Mongolia and the effects, the impact of the crime is being felt in Kenya? And that's why mutual legal assistance comes in. That's why we need to figure out, how do we, as a region, as a continent, as a globe, implement measures that will not give safe haven to these criminals where they might think they are safe. It might be difficult for fictitious country called Outer Mongolia to allow extradition of their citizen to Nairobi to face the law here. But if they are signatories of a global instrument that says it's an offense there, it is also an offense in Kenya, the person has been arrested, charge them in Outer Mongolia, let them face the music. So be it, because to be honest, it would be preferable for them to come to Kenya, but highly unlikely that they'll come to Kenya. So I think we just need to find these criminals where they are through using instruments of mutual legal assistance to make sure that they don't get away. Those safe havens need to be identified, and those countries who might be providing an enabling environment need to be made pariahs, because there are countries which are considered safe havens for a specific reason. If those countries are made pariahs, then the criminals will no longer be safe. And I think that's one of the ways, in fact, perhaps the most central way of addressing the criminals who will use tools of technology, including forms of AI, to commit crimes. Really, for me, it's as simple as that. The law doesn't need to go any further, in my view, than it already is. You're muted, Evelyn. You're muted, Evelyn. Can't hear you.
Sorry for that. Yeah, thank you very much, Martinez. That brings us to the end of our discussion. And I would like to read out just a few questions that are in the chat box. The first question, which I think perhaps you have already mentioned in your discussion, from Sheila Bahati: what's the future of AI in the legal profession, and how best can legal and academicians, practitioners use it in their day-to-day operations? I think this you have touched on, unless you want to say something more about it.
Yes, don't use it without applying your analytical and critical thinking. In other words, if you're doing a virtual exam and all you're doing is taking the question, put it in a tool, you get the answer, you come and answer the exam and expect that Mwalimu Asala will give you first class honors, you might very well get your first class honors. Of course, there are ways to draft questions in different ways, but if you're not using your critical mind, then you're not using the tool very well. So that's the only thing I would add without being repetitive.
Okay. The second question: should we foresee a future where AI will replace um, physical lectures in learning institutions?
No, I don't think. Okay, look, I can't see into the future, right? When I started practicing technology law, nobody thought AI wasn't even a term. So we didn't think it was there. So I can't say I do not foresee a future where it will replace physical learning. But there is a school that I went to last week, Friday, where my godson goes to. And it was interesting being there with other fathers. They were showing us how, in their biology class, all the students in biology class get their VER sets, which they put on, and there's a virtual teacher. And the virtual teacher was explaining to them how the heart works. When I was in school doing biology, the heart was a picture that I looked at. And maybe there were different arrows showing the right ventricle, the left ventricle, etc., the aorta. But what this was doing, the virtual teacher, assisted by the physical teacher, so the physical teacher was making certain actions to dissect the heart, show you how the blood pumps, show you how you could go into the left ventricle, go in and look at how the muscles work inside the heart. I mean, this is such practical learning. And remember, you have a VR headset on, so it's as real as it gets. That is a perfect example of how AI can complement actual teaching, physical teaching. And that's why I gave the answer. I don't see it replacing. At the very heart of who we are is social animals. So the biggest challenge for us during COVID was not being able to socially engage. That was a crisis. So for as long as we remain wired as humans, we'll want to socially engage. And to that extent, we need to make sure that we can use AI as an assistive tool, as an enabling tool, but not to replace. I don't know that it would. I really doubt. But then again, I could be wrong.
Thanks for that clarification, Fitness. We have another question from Duncan Ochien, and he's asking, is there a concern that AI could be giving us a fake demeanor and stature of some legal practitioners in terms of linguistic and legal thinking capabilities?
I'm not entirely sure what you just asked. Giving stature, you might have to repeat the question. I'm trying to understand what was being asked, and I'm not sure I understand what he's asking. Giving a fake legal stature.
Yeah.
Please ask it again. I I didn't understand.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Is there a concern that AI could be giving us a fake demeanor and stature of some legal practitioners in terms of linguistic and legal thinking capability?
fake demeanor of practitioners in terms of linguistic ability. I guess I'd say it could. I mean, this is how I understand the question. Is AI allowing us to see what is not there? In other words,
Yeah.
to see Evelyn as having a certain level of linguistic capability when she really isn't. Now, I guess the question is, where is that engagement? Let me put it this way. In certain online communities, I can speak through my robot, through my AI companion. I can engage, but I'm engaging in a virtual forum. If I'm in court appearing before Justice Odunga, then Justice Odunga is a real life person. I mean, even if I'm in virtual court, I can see him, I can engage him, I can see opposing counsel. And therefore, opposing counsel will not be able to, in my view, engage in certain linguistic grandiloquence that is not him or her. If it is him or her, then that's different. What I mean is this. If I don't know if some of you recall, I can't remember if it was I think it was the 2013 presidential election petition where PLO Lumumba appeared. I can't remember for whom. I think it was the chairperson of the IBC. Never mind, that's irrelevant. And in his own inimitable way, how he gives speeches, he was arguing, and it's quite entertaining. Now, if someone attempted to speak like PLO, we know they're not PLO. We'll just be like, man, what are you doing? Like, come on, get off the high horse. So we know who speaks in what way, who employs linguistic tools in the way that they do, in the way that we're used to them. And if you're not that kind of person, I don't know that AI could make you that, because either you're engaging in an online platform, in an online forum where you're not yourself, you're using your AI companion, a robot is that is acting as you and therefore is speaking as you and therefore can be algorithmed to speak in certain ways that you would not otherwise be able to speak. I'm afraid that's the best I could give
Yeah, I
to what
think
I thought was being asked.
the person who is posing the question just made an addition, and the addition is in terms of legal analytical thinking capabilities. So I think this is a scenario where
So
a practitioner is using AI to enhance their legal and analytical capabilities. Yeah, so what they are presenting to the court is not originally from them, but it's informed by AI.
There's two ways I would respond to that. The first, I did say earlier that when you are engaging with artificial intelligence, you should not take leave of critical thinking or analytical thinking. You need to still engage. Consequently, when you have an AI tool that has parsed a huge amount of data in helping you prepare a legal brief or a court presentation, that data still has to be, whatever has been summarized for you, still has to be analyzed and a strategy derived, a conclusion, a plan for how you would argue. So that's the critical thinking. And you might be looking up for case law to support your legal brief, and you find two diametrically opposed decisions of even court. And so you need to apply your critical thinking, number one, as to which case supports you very well. And the case that doesn't support you, that could potentially be used by a component, how do you distinguish it? Get the similar cases in terms of the legal principle. That's the critical thinking I'm speaking to that can be used as an outcome of the exercise of data processing. Now, I think you could ask the AI tool, not I think, I know you could ask the AI tool to give you a strategy, to give you a sense of what is the best case to use in this context to support the case that I am arguing in court. And the tool would, I think, be able to give you its analysis based on all this data that it has consumed. So the answer is yes and yes. I think you still need to use your abilities of critical and analytical thinking, but you can still use the tool. So, and if the tool gave me its analysis, I think it behoves me to say, okay, I can see why it says that, but maybe I don't agree. In other words, query, question, don't take it as gospel truth. Not as gospel truth. I mean, employ your own mind. You might ultimately agree with it, you might disagree with it, but there you go.
Mhm. Okay. And Judy Mooley is asking, how can we contribute to making AI in the legal profession more entrenched and acceptable?
That starts with an individual journey. I mentioned the things that you need to start doing in terms of embracing AI and getting to grips with what and how AI can be helpful to you. It's individual, it starts there. I think it's important that all corporates, all law firms, in whatever legal professional capacity you exist, universities for that matter, begin to set aside budgets to bring on board AI tools that can support research, that can support management of clients, management of files if you're in a law firm. In other words, if the organization is serious about using AI to grow its business, then you need to set aside the money for that. So it starts with the individual, but I think we need to look for those entities to work for that are using AI in a way that's supportive and helpful, because then it enhances what you've already started as an individual. If you don't have an organization, you don't belong to an organization that is providing that kind of support, then maybe you want to ask yourself whether you still want to stay there. But I guess what I'm saying is it's both individual, but also the support of the employer is very important towards helping move its employees into a space where they're becoming more efficient. And therefore, those tools need to be brought on board.
Mhm. And Saifero Josephat wants you to help him understand whether he can use AI to answer his assignments instead of going to the library and doing the textbook reading.
Easy answer, absolutely. You don't need to go to the library. I mean, when I was doing pupillage, I mean, we'd have to go into the library and you're pulling down some Halsbury's laws that have not been touched for a couple of months. They're full of dust. They make your shirt dusty. We'd have to sneak into the High Court library by trying to walk in like an advocate. If they don't ask you for your advocate's ID, then you go in and you do research. Of course. And you don't need to be doing that today if you can get all the legal material online. I mean, if Kenya law already has appended ChatGPT so that you can search for cases better, then you don't need to do that. If all of Halsbury's laws are available online, then use AI to pass them for the company law principle that you're researching. Absolutely. The only thing I beg is that apply your mind. And applying your mind, incidentally, is not just with the results. Applying your mind happens even with how you ask the question. If you ask the question in a very narrow way, you'll get results that might not give you the flavor of the width of what you're looking for. Conversely, if you ask the question in a very general way, you'll get a lot of unhelpful material. So the analytical thinking means your legal problem becomes a first point of applying your analytical critical thinking. And once you understand it, then you figure out, okay, this is the strategy I'll take to use this AI tool to help me get to this point. And when you do that, you're already applying your critical thinking. When you get those results, you're like, this is not quite, or this is quite it, but I like this. And it's iterative, both for you and the AI tool. So yes, but if you're thinking of just copy paste, then I mean, if you want to take leave of your brains, then don't even study law. Just quit while you're ahead.
Thank you very much, Stephen Kiptines, for joining us tonight and helping us understand matters artificial intelligence in the legal profession. Thank you for your insights. That was excellent. I know you have made a huge contribution to most of our understanding of all these things that get into the discussion of artificial intelligence, especially from our legal profession. So without much ado, this brings us to the end of this particular discussion tonight. And I want to encourage our audience to subscribe so that you get notification of our next talk Monday next week. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you, Mwalimu. Have a good evening.